I found her entire world shattered in the span of a single phone call, and I wasn't even supposed to hear it. My name is Thomas, and at 62 years old, I thought I knew everything about my wife Elisabeth. We'd been married for 37 years, raised 3 children together, welcomed 5 grandchildren into our lives, and built what I believed was an unbreakable bond. Our house in Mesa had witnessed decades of laughter, arguments, reconciliations, and quiet mornings over coffee. The walls held memories of birthday parties, graduations, and late-night conversations about dreams and fears. Every corner of that house told a story about us. Our golden retriever, Bailey, had been the latest addition to our household 3 years ago, a retirement gift we'd given ourselves. Elisabeth had fallen in love with him instantly at the shelter, and watching her laugh as the puppy climbed into her lap reminded me why I'd married her in the first place. She had this way of finding joy in simple moments, or at least I thought she did. Elisabeth was my second marriage. My first had ended badly when I was 23, young, stupid, and unprepared for commitment. That failure had haunted me for years, made me cautious about love. But Elisabeth? She was different. Patient where my first wife had been demanding, steady where the other had been volatile. She'd taught me what partnership really meant, or so I'd believed for nearly 4 decades. We'd weathered financial struggles in the early years, the chaos of raising 3 kids on tight budgets, the stress of aging parents, and the transition into retirement. Through it all, I thought we'd remained solid. A team. That October afternoon started like any other. The Arizona heat was finally breaking, and I'd spent the morning raking leaves in our backyard. The cottonwood trees we'd planted 20 years ago had grown massive, and every autumn they dumped what felt like millions of golden leaves across our property. It was therapeutic work, really, repetitive, mindless, giving me time to think about nothing in particular. Bailey followed me around, occasionally stopping to investigate interesting scents or chase a leaf caught in the breeze. He'd bring me sticks, dropping them at my feet with hopeful eyes, and I'd throw them just to see his joy. Elisabeth had mentioned she was going to organize some photo albums in the living room, a project she'd been putting off for months. "I want to get them in order for the grandkids," she'd said over breakfast, "so they can see our history, where they came from." I'd smiled at that, touched by her thoughtfulness. Our history. What a joke that turned out to be. I came inside around 2 o'clock, sweaty and ready for a cold drink. The house was quiet, too quiet. Usually, Elisabeth had the radio on or was talking on the phone with one of our daughters. I assumed she'd gone to the bedroom for a nap, something she'd been doing more frequently lately. "Getting old," she'd joke. "Need my beauty rest." I'd kiss her forehead and tell her she was beautiful regardless. God, how many of those tender moments had been lies. I headed to my workshop in the back of the house, a converted garage where I'd been building a dollhouse for our youngest granddaughter's birthday. Emma was turning 6 in December, and I'd promised her something special. The project had consumed my free time for weeks, getting the tiny shingles right, wiring miniature lights, painting each room a different color. Elisabeth would come out occasionally, admire my progress, bring me lemonade. "You're such a good grandfather," she'd say. I was measuring wood when I heard it. At first, I thought the television was on. Elisabeth's voice carried through the house, muffled but audible. I paused, listening. The tone was wrong, too intimate, too soft. Then I heard something that made my blood run cold. "I can't wait to see you tonight, Robyn. Thomas is planning to watch the game with Paul from next door. We'll have at least 3 hours. My hand froze on the saw. The measuring tape clattered to the workbench. Robyn. The name echoed in my head. I knew our neighbors, our friends, our family. There was no Robyn. There was a pause, and then her laugh, that intimate, breathy laugh I thought was reserved only for me. The laugh she'd given me on our wedding night, during the birth of our children, on vacation mornings in bed. "No, he doesn't suspect anything. He's been so absorbed in that dollhouse project. Honestly, I feel terrible sometimes, but then I remember how alive you make me feel." The words hit me like physical blows. My dollhouse project, my expression of love for our granddaughter, had become her cover story. My dedication to family had made me blind. I stood paralyzed in my workshop, sawdust coating my arms, my mind racing. How long? How many times had she used my love against me? "I know we said we'd be careful," Elisabeth continued, her voice dropping lower. "But I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of pretending everything is perfect when I feel like I've been sleepwalking through my life for years." Sleepwalking. 37 years of marriage, and she'd been sleepwalking. 3 children. 5 grandchildren. A lifetime of memories. Sleepwalking. The sound suddenly cut off. She must have realized her speaker was on, and turned it off quickly. I heard her footsteps moving rapidly through the house, probably checking if I'd heard anything. The floorboards creaked in that familiar pattern, through the living room, past the kitchen, toward the back of the house. I didn't move. I barely breathed. After a minute, I forced myself to pick up the saw again and made a few cuts, making enough noise to seem occupied. The blade screamed through the wood, and I wished I could scream too. My hands shook so badly I had to stop before I hurt myself. I set down the saw, gripped the edge of the workbench, and tried to understand what had just happened to my life. That night, I watched Elisabeth carefully. She acted completely normal, asked about my day, commented on how much progress I'd made on the dollhouse, served dinner with a smile. We had chicken and roasted vegetables, her specialty. She talked about a phone call with our daughter Jessica, about Emma's upcoming school play, about needing to buy gifts for the grandkids soon since Christmas was only 2 months away. I played along, forcing food down a throat that felt constricted. But inside, I was calculating, planning. Every smile she gave me felt like a knife. Every casual touch, her hand on my shoulder as she passed, her kiss on my cheek before bed, felt like a betrayal. When we went to bed that night, she curled up against me like she had for decades. I lay there rigid, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe, wondering who this stranger was. The next morning, I told Elisabeth I was going fishing with Paul for the day. She seemed pleased, maybe even relieved. "That's wonderful, honey," she said, packing me a lunch like a devoted wife. "You boys have fun. Don't forget sunscreen." She kissed me goodbye at the door, and I had to resist the urge to pull away. Instead, I drove to a coffee shop across town and sat there for 3 hours thinking. The coffee grew cold in my cup as I stared out the window, watching strangers go about their normal lives. I needed proof. I needed to understand the scope of this betrayal before I decided what to do. The lawyer side of my brain, I'd worked in contract law before retirement, kicked in. Documentation. Evidence. Facts. I went home that evening with a plan. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a shadow in my own life. I told Elisabeth I'd joined a woodworking club that met 3 times a week. She encouraged it enthusiastically. "That's perfect, Thomas. You need more social interaction. You've been cooped up in that workshop too much." Her support felt obscene. Instead of woodworking, I followed her. The first time was on a Tuesday afternoon. She told me she was going to a book club meeting. I watched her drive away, waited 15 minutes, then followed in my truck. She didn't go to any book club. She drove to a small apartment complex on the east side of Mesa, a rundown place with peeling paint and a barely maintained courtyard. I parked down the street and watched as a man answered the door of Unit 3B. Tall, younger than me, maybe late 40s, with dark hair graying at the temples. Athletic build. Handsome, I supposed, in that way that middle-aged women probably found attractive. They didn't kiss outside, but the way he touched her arm, the way she leaned into him, the way she looked up at his face, it told me everything. She looked at him the way she used to look at me 37 years ago. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes after she went inside, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. Then I drove to a library and started researching. Robyn Mitchell, age 48, worked as a physical therapist at a clinic in Scottsdale. Divorced, no children. He'd moved to Mesa 2 years ago from California. 2 years. The timeline clicked into place. Elisabeth's book club had started about 2 years ago. Her volunteer work at the community center had started around the same time. Her sudden interest in yoga classes and wellness workshops. All of it, lies stacked upon lies. I created a spreadsheet, documenting every instance I could remember of her being busy over the past 2 years. The patterns emerged quickly. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, occasional Saturday mornings, 1 weekend a month when she claimed to visit our daughter in Nevada. I called Jessica that night while Elisabeth was in the shower. "Hey, sweetheart. Quick question. When was the last time your mother visited you?" "Mom? Oh gosh, Dad, it's been almost 6 months. Why? Is everything okay?" 6 months. But Elisabeth had made 3 weekend trips to see Jessica in that time. "Everything's fine," I lied. "Just checking on something. Love you, honey." I hired a lawyer quietly, meeting with her during my supposed woodworking sessions. Her name was Carolina Martinez, and she came highly recommended by a former colleague. Her office was efficient and modern, and she was sharp, no-nonsense, and understanding. "In Arizona, it's a no-fault divorce state," she explained during our first meeting. "But infidelity can affect the division of assets, especially if marital funds were used for the affair. Do you have joint accounts? Everything's joint. 37 years of marriage. She nodded. Get me bank statements for the past 2 years. Credit card records. Phone bills if you can. And if you have any documented proof of the affair, photos, texts, anything, that helps. I had her begin officially documenting everything. I spent hours going through bank statements, highlighting charges at restaurants I'd never been to. Hotels booked on weekends when Elisabeth claimed she was visiting Jessica. A jewelry purchase for $200. I'd never received any jewelry. Spa treatments in Scottsdale near Robyn's clinic. The rage I felt was unlike anything I'd experienced. But beneath the rage was something worse, profound sadness. The woman I'd loved for 37 years, who I'd built a life with, who I'd thought I'd grow old with, was a complete stranger. Every memory now felt tainted. Had she been thinking of him during our grandson's baptism? During our anniversary dinner? During the quiet evenings we'd spent on the porch, talking about our dreams for retirement? I knew I needed something more than just financial records and my own surveillance notes. Something that would ensure she understood the magnitude of what she'd done. Something that would make the truth undeniable. I invested in a small GPS tracker, the kind you could attach to a car. It felt dirty, secretive, wrong. But then again, so was her affair. I placed it on her car one morning while she was still sleeping, hidden under the rear bumper. The app on my phone would show me everywhere she went. The data was damning. Regular visits to Robyn's apartment. A hotel in Tempe she'd visited 6 times over 2 months. A restaurant in Phoenix that clearly wasn't hosting any book club meetings. I took screenshots of everything, created a detailed timeline, cross-referenced it with her excuses and our bank statements. I also started checking her phone when she was in the shower or distracted with the grandkids. I felt like a criminal in my own home, but I'd learned the password months ago when she'd asked me to check a message while she was cooking. The texts were careful, nothing explicitly sexual, but the emotional intimacy was worse than any physical description could have been. Thinking of you, Robyn had written one evening. Can't wait until Thursday, she'd responded. These days between seeing you feel like forever. You make me feel young again, one of her messages read. Like I matter. That one hurt the most. Like she mattered. As if 37 years of me showing her she mattered meant nothing. I screenshotted every message, backed them up to a cloud drive Carolina could access. I felt physically ill doing it, but I pushed through. This was survival now. 3 weeks after that phone call, I had my plan ready. Carolina had the divorce papers prepared. She'd documented everything, the affair, the financial evidence, the timeline. This is one of the most comprehensive cases I've worked on, she told me. The judge will absolutely consider this when dividing assets. But I wanted more than just a favorable divorce settlement. I wanted Elisabeth to face what she'd done, to see the consequences, to understand that actions have repercussions beyond just splitting up bank accounts. I invited all 3 of our children, Robyn, Paul Jr., and their sister Jessica, along with their families to our house for Sunday dinner. Elisabeth was thrilled when I told her, "Oh, Thomas, what a wonderful idea. We haven't had everyone together since summer. I'll make my famous pot roast." She spent the next few days in a flurry of preparation, cleaning the house, planning the menu, buying special treats for the grandkids. She was radiant, excited, playing the role of perfect grandmother and wife. I watched her performance with a strange detachment, like I was observing a play. I also invited Elisabeth's mother, Helen, a sharp woman in her 80s, her 2 sisters, Martha and Patricia, and my brother Robert. A full family gathering. Elisabeth was so happy she actually cried. "This is exactly what I needed," she said, hugging me. "Our family all together. This is what matters most." What she didn't know was that I'd also prepared something else. I'd created a digital presentation on my tablet. Screenshots, bank statements, timeline, photos of her entering Robyn's apartment. Everything organized, clear, undeniable. The night before the dinner, I barely slept. Elisabeth cuddled against me, content and unsuspecting, while I stared at the shadows on the ceiling and wondered if I was doing the right thing. Part of me wanted to cancel everything, to just file for divorce quietly and disappear. But the larger part, the part that felt betrayed not just as a husband, but as a father and grandfather, knew that exposure was the only path forward. Sunday arrived with beautiful autumn weather. The temperature was perfect, mid-70s, clear sky, light breeze. Our house filled with the chaos of children and grandchildren arriving, shouts of greeting, hugs, laughter. Bailey was in heaven with all the attention, racing from child to child, tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. Elisabeth moved through the crowd, playing the perfect matriarch, her smile bright and genuine. She'd worn her favorite blue dress, the one that brought out her eyes. She'd even gone to the salon that week for a fresh cut and color. She looked beautiful, happy, alive. I watched her hug our children, kiss our grandchildren, laugh with her sisters. Robyn pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Dad, this was a great idea. Mom seems really happy lately. You guys are doing well." I managed a smile. "We'll talk soon, son." Dinner was magnificent. Elisabeth had outdone herself. Pot roast with all the fixings, homemade rolls, 3 different desserts. Everyone ate and praised her cooking. The grandchildren ran around the backyard while the adults lingered over coffee and conversation. It was perfect. Norman Rockwell couldn't have painted a more idyllic family scene. After dinner, as the sun started to set and cast golden light through the windows, I stood up and tapped my glass. The room quieted gradually, children shushed, conversations trailing off. "I want to thank everyone for coming today," I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Family means everything to me. Loyalty means everything to me." Elisabeth smiled at me from across the room, unsuspecting, her eyes soft with affection. "Which is why what I'm about to share is so difficult." I pulled out my tablet. 3 weeks ago, I accidentally overheard a phone conversation. "Elisabeth, your speaker was on, and I was in the workshop." Her face drained of color instantly. The smile disappeared. I watched the realization hit her like a wave. She knew exactly which conversation I meant. "For the past 2 years, my wife has been having an affair with a man named Robyn Mitchell." The explosion of voices was immediate. Elisabeth's mother gasped audibly, her hand flying to her chest. Martha said, "No, that's not." Our children stood frozen, looking between us. Jessica's face crumpled. Reuben's jaw clenched. Paul Jr. grabbed his wife's hand. Elisabeth started to speak, then stopped, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "I have documentation," I continued, keeping my voice calm and factual, like I was presenting a case in court. "Bank statements showing over $15,000 spent on hotels and dinners. Text messages I recovered from the phone records. Photos I took while following you to his apartment on Maple Street." I swiped through the presentation on my tablet, holding it up so people could see. The hotel receipts. The restaurant bills. The GPS tracking data. Her texts. Everything. "Thomas, please." Elisabeth finally found her voice, but it came out as barely a whisper. "I filed for divorce on Friday. The papers will be served tomorrow. I wanted our family to hear this from me first, to understand why their mother and grandmother chose to destroy our family for a man she's known for 2 years. Our daughter Jessica was crying openly now, her husband's arm around her shoulders. Robyn looked like he wanted to punch something, his face red, fists clenched. Paul Jr. had gone pale, staring at his mother like he'd never seen her before. Elisabeth's mother stood up shakily. "Elisabeth Ann, is this true?" Elisabeth looked at her mother, then at our children, then at me. Tears streamed down her face. It's not, you don't understand." "Did you or did you not have an affair?" Helen demanded, her voice sharp despite her age. "Yes, but—" "Then there's nothing to understand," Helen said coldly. She turned to her other daughters. "Martha, Patricia, we're leaving." "Mom, please." Elisabeth reached for her mother. "Don't," Helen said, pulling away. "I raised you better than this. Everyone needs to leave," I said quietly, my voice cutting through the chaos. "Now, take the food if you want. But we need privacy." The exodus was painful to watch. Our children were torn, wanting to comfort us both, but not knowing how. Jessica hugged me, sobbing. Robyn squeezed my shoulder wordlessly. Paul Jr. couldn't even look at Elisabeth. The grandchildren sensed something was terribly wrong, but didn't understand what, clinging to their parents as they were ushered out. Elisabeth's sisters left without a word to her, following their mother. My brother Robert paused at the door. "Call me if you need anything," he said simply. Within 30 minutes, the house was empty except for Elisabeth, me, and Bailey, who whined softly, sensing the tension. The beautiful dinner sat half-eaten on the table. The house that had been so full of life and laughter felt like a tomb. "How could you do this to them?" Elisabeth whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Humiliating me in front of everyone? How could I?" I laughed bitterly. "How could you betray 37 years of marriage? How could you lie to my face every single day? You don't understand." "Then make me understand, Elisabeth." She sank into a chair. I felt invisible. After we retired, you had your projects, your hobbies. I felt like I was just here, existing. And then I met Robyn at a community event, and he saw me. Really saw me. So you destroyed our marriage because you felt bored? It's more complicated than that. No, I said. It's really not. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Carolina was as good as her word. Because I could prove Elisabeth had used marital funds for her affair, over $15,000 in the past 2 years. The judge awarded me the house and the majority of our retirement accounts. Elisabeth would get a small monthly payment and could keep her car. Our children were devastated. Robyn refused to speak to his mother for months. Jessica tried to play mediator, but eventually gave up. Paul Jr. told Elisabeth he needed time to process everything. But the real twist came 6 weeks after that dinner party. I was at the grocery store when I ran into a woman I didn't recognize at first. She approached me cautiously. Thomas? I'm Andrea, Robyn's ex-wife. I stiffened. What do you want? I heard about what happened. I wanted you to know. Robyn called it off with Elisabeth the day after your family dinner. Apparently, when things got real, when it wasn't just sneaking around anymore, he realized he didn't actually want a relationship with her. He told her he'd never intended for it to be serious. I stared at her. Why are you telling me this? Because he did the same thing to me. He's a serial affair partner. He likes the excitement, the secrecy. But commitment? Responsibility? He runs from that. She paused. I thought you deserved to know that she lost everything for someone who never really wanted her. After Andrea left, I sat in my car for a long time. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired. Elisabeth moved into a small apartment in a less desirable part of Mesa. Without Robyn, without her family's respect, without the life she'd known for nearly 4 decades. Our children visited her occasionally, but the relationships were strained, fractured. I kept the house, Bailey, and my dignity. I had my children's respect, even if they were hurting. I had my routines, my projects, my life. One evening in late November, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset with Bailey at my feet, I thought about revenge. People talk about it like it's this satisfying, cathartic thing. But the truth is more complicated. Elisabeth hadn't just lost me. She'd lost our children's trust, her grandchildren's easy affection, her place in the family we'd built together. She'd lost her home, her financial security, her future. And she'd discovered that the man she'd risked everything for had never intended to catch her. I didn't have to destroy her. She'd destroyed herself. I just made sure everyone knew it. My phone buzzed. A text from Robyn. Dad, we're bringing the kids by this weekend. Thought we could help you put up Christmas lights. I smiled, typing back a response. Life would go on. Different, smaller in some ways, but mine. Honest. Real. Bailey lifted his head, and I scratched behind his ears. Just you and me now, buddy, I said softly. The desert wind picked up, carrying the scent of creosote and dust. Somewhere across town, Elisabeth was living with her choices. And here I was living with mine. I'd chosen truth. She'd chosen lies. In the end, that made all the difference. Thank you for watching the video to the end. YouTube may no longer suggest my channel to you, so subscribe to it to receive new interesting stories. You will also help the channel grow and improve the quality of its content. A playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to is now displayed on the screen. You can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.